Welcome to If This Bar Could Talk and our limited series on cocktail modifiers. Alchedemics.com defines a cocktail modifier as a cocktail ingredient, usually alcoholic and typically fortified wine or a liqueur, that both softens the base spirit and adds flavor to the drink. In this series, we'll talk to the experts, bar professionals, and regular folks like us to better understand what modifiers are and how to use them. Next up, Crème de Violette.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jake Parrott. I'm the portfolio manager for spirits and aromatized wines for Haus Alpenz, which is a U.S. national importer of interesting wines, spirits, liqueurs, cordials, etc.
So, Jake, thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What can you tell us about Crème de Violette? How is it developed? How is it made? What's the history?
I think we'll start with the history. Crème de Violette as a category comes from what I kind of call it the Baroque era of cocktails. It's the last real evolution in cocktails before U.S. Prohibition. And it's the time when cocktails start to incorporate more and more kind of out there ingredients. This is where you start getting the drinks that call for Fernet and Kümmel and Swedish punch. And Crème de Violette sort of works in that world. The flavor was well known at the time from candies. And so, like a lot of other candy flavors, it wasn't that big a jump to make it into a liqueur as well. Of course, the color, which at that time came from something else that was quite bitter, but now is a flavorless color, was a big part of that as well. And you know, the aviation cocktail, which a lot of folks think of as the main thing you use Crème de Violette for, is named for its color and comes from a time before the Wright brothers. So it's a sort of a little bit of a microcosm of what people were doing with cocktails in that time in the very, very early 1900s. But the flavor was well known, and we can talk a little bit about some of the technical characteristics of the flavor later if you like.
Yeah.
It's made pretty simply. It's made at so Rothman and Winter Crème de Violette is what we're talking about here, which is one of the more well-known examples of the category here in the USA. It's made at the Perkart Distillery in Steyr, Austria. Perkart is a fourth-generation distiller and liqueur maker, and it's Bernd Perkart and his father that do all the making, and they make all the flavoring syrups as well. So with Rothman Winter Crème de Violette, they first use 2 or 3 types of Austrian violets to make a violet syrup, very concentrated in flavor, and then they combine it with clear unaged wine brandy, which brings, it's not completely neutral. It brings a little bit of aromatic heft and a little bit of texture, and then sugar. It's quite on the sweet side, being a crème de Violette. That term is defined in European law for a minimum level of sugar that's higher than a normal liqueur. But you need that sweetness, both for the traditional style, the style that would have been the case back in the late 19th and early 20th century, but because even though Crème de Violette ends up quite sweet, violets are quite bitter. So there is a necessity to balance that bitterness. And then it's colored with a flavorless color because the main reason people started using Crème de Violette in cocktails, in addition to harkening back to a flavor they knew, was for the color. So
Interesting. So how is it made exactly?
It's a compounded liqueur, much like many other compounded liqueurs. In the Kochensirupe, or the syrup kitchen at the distillery at Perkart, the Perkarts make a violet syrup, and then they add it at a measured dose to an unaged wine brandy, bring it down to bottling strength, which is 20% alcohol, of course, and sweeten it. And add the color. So it's a relatively simple process, except for making the syrup, which is, does require some skill, but they've been doing it for a long time.
What other liqueurs flavors do they make there?
So we're very fortunate to get to work with Distillery Perkart for a lot of things. In the line called Rothman and Winter, there's the Crème de Violette, but then there's also 5 fruit liqueurs: apricot, pear, peach, cherry, and elderberry. And we're pretty careful not to refer to those as flavors per se. And the reason is because those fruit liqueurs are built from the ground up to be from the fruit. So the base alcohol is not wine brandy. It's not neutral alcohol. It's distilled from the fruit. And the flavoring is the juice of the fruit. There's not going to be a Rothman and Winter, pamplemousse, because they don't distill grapefruits. So what you get with that is you get a lot more aroma in the finished liqueur, which is great when you dilute it. You can sense it in a cocktail, but then you get the natural acidity and grip of the fruit juice, and a little bit, especially in the case of things like peach and elderberry, a little bit of that natural bitter as well, which is really handy in a cocktail. We also work with Parrott to, we buy their recipe for Nüsse Schnapps, or what you might know as Nocino or walnut liqueur, their old family recipe for Nüsse Schnapps. And they also are the folks that are responsible for making St. Elizabeth allspice dram. When we wanted to bring allspice dram to America, there were no producers on the island of Jamaica that were making it in commercial quantities. So we found an old recipe, and we found the right ingredients, and we took it to Herr Parrott, and he was more than happy to set up what is a pretty involved process for making it. They also do a bit of bottling for us at Parrott, so they're a really wonderful partner and really great folks to work with, a small family company.
That's awesome.
Is Crème de Violette, is it shelf stable, or should it be kept in the fridge?
So our guidance on keeping stuff in the fridge is generally, if something is made with a fresh wine base, then you should keep it in the fridge. The base of Rothman Winter Crème de Violette is a distillate, a clear unaged wine brandy, so it's fine. I would keep it out of warmth and keep it out of direct light, just like you would virtually anything comestible. But no, it is to any extent that a naturally made liqueur could be shelf stable.
And how old is this recipe?
The recipe is well known, at least back to the late 1800s, because it was a confectioner flavor. So violet syrup was well known as pretty much as soon as commercial confectionery became a thing. So while Rothman Winter Crème de Violette has been imported to the United States since about 2009, the method for making it is not unknown.
So what else should we know? What else should our listeners know about Crème de Violette?
So I think a lot of folks come to Crème de Violette by looking up a cocktail called the Aviation. For a lot of folks, it's kind of the first, not necessarily their first craft cocktail, but kind of the first one that sort of takes them on a real voyage of discovery. What I would say is that there's a lot more things you can do with Rothman Winter Crème de Violette. In fact, during COVID, we've heard a lot from retailers around the country who say that most folks who are buying Rothman Winter Crème de Violette are buying it to mix with vodka and lemonade, which is pretty darn delicious. Kind of the same idea, maybe a little bit simpler as the Aviation. The Aviation is, if you can nail your construction of the Aviation on any given day, it's an amazing cocktail, but it does employ two of the more difficult to work with sweeteners out there in terms of Crème de Violette and maraschino liqueur. My personal favorite way to drink Rothman Winter Crème de Violette is in sparkling wine. The beauty of the intensity of Crème de Violette and the high aromatics of Crème de Violette is it can take a lot of dilution, and there's very few things that are more elegant or easy to make than a Violette Royale with Rothman Winter Crème de Violette and sparkling wine. You can use a lot of different sparkling wines. Even a slightly sweeter sparkling wine will work because, again, violets have that natural bitterness, but you could go all the way up to using a very nice champagne. One thing that I would say for that drink, though, is that drink is highly improved with a garnish of a grapefruit peel. And this is something that we find, this is a little mixology trick that we found as we work with a lot of bittersweet things. Is that if you have something that's on the bitter side, expressing grapefruit oil over the drink is going to change the way that you perceive that bitterness. When you smell grapefruit oil is highly volatile and suggests bitterness to the brain. So when you smell that grapefruit oil, all of a sudden your brain is like, okay, that's all the bitter I want to taste right now. So different neurons will fire and you'll taste more of the other flavors of the drink. The effect is remarkably similar to the use of salt in drinks. except there's also an aromatic component to it. So highly recommend for any of those kind of simple violet drinks, whether it's a Violette Royale or maybe you put some Crème de Violette in a silver gin fizz, so a little egg white drink, that you use grapefruit peel over the top to really bring the flavors into focus and not really think as much about the bitterness.
Oh, wow. That's
Interesting.
an interesting and fun tip. We're going to have to try that. And I love the idea of putting it in sparkling wine. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And I would give you a spec, but honestly, make it to the color you like, and you're probably going to like it. I mean, and that's very much a harkening back to the real history of this stuff. It was as a visual part of a drinking experience, as well as of course, the flavor and aroma.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
This was wonderful and super informative.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, it's we're very fortunate to have things that have a lot of great both story and technical story behind them.
And now we'll hear from a professional bartender about how they use Crème de Violette in a cocktail. Welcome to the podcast, Kyle Strategier from the Soul Bar in Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you so much for having me. I always love being able to talk spirits with you guys. So Crème de Violette's a really interesting ingredient because floral flavors don't really make their way into too many drinks. And when you use them, you really have to respect the fact that they can overwhelm a cocktail really quick. So I think we're all familiar with certain drinks like Ramos Gin Fizz having orange flower, blossom flower water in there. Or if you have ever worked with rose water before, then you kind of know that a little bit goes a long way. Right. So the same thing goes with Crème de Violette. When you're working with it, especially when I think most of us have first seen it, we saw it in an aviation. In an aviation cocktail, most of the time you've seen a picture where it's bright purple. So the first instinct was like, well, I followed the recipe. I've added this 1/4 ounce, but it's not that purple. And then you start adding more, and eventually it kind of tastes like you're drinking a bar. So my first advice is always make sure that you ease up and approach it gently. Most of the time that I make an aviation, I'm looking at a 1/4 ounce or less. And that's really going to have the right taste. Now, if you're looking to have that perfect color that a lot of people are going for, then think about using either like Empress Gin, or you're going to find some type of butterfly PT in order to get that purple, but don't do it with the Crème de Violette, with the flavor. Some of the other fun ways that we've been working with it lately is we have it in a drink at Soul Bar called the Saxon Violets. And it's a concept cocktail where we started with the idea, and luckily we were able to make it work out. So we really loved the punk song, Sex and Violence, and we were like playing on words, and we were like, well, I bet you dry sack sherry will go pretty good with Crème de Violette because you have the acidity and you have a lot of fun things going on in that sherry. So then the challenge after that was, well, how do you balance floral flavors? And when you first look at it, you think about like sweet and sour. And obviously, when you balance those in a drink, it's going to help balance other components around it. And then you think, well, bitterness can help balance just that sweet and sour combo. And one of the best drinks that we were thinking about was the Sharpie Mustache from Amore Margot, and thinking about like, how could we rework that cocktail? So we brought in the Bonal, and we went with the cast strength whiskey from Sagamore. They do a great job of having something that can really stand up to cocktails. And so the violet wasn't overpowering the drink. And then we had the sherry to come through with the acidity component. And Bonal, if you're not familiar with it, very bitter Amaro, wine-based, a lot of, deep flavor in there to give it a backbone. And then coming through with sweeter Amaro to kind of help balance that. So a lot of components working together, even before dialing in how much of the Crème de Violette is going to end up in the drink. And I think we went with Giffard, but it does make a difference which brand of violet liqueur that you're going with. Again, most of them are going to be made in a very similar process, where what you're looking at is more of a perfume technique. if you're familiar with how rose water is made, you have the flowers that are in a pot, and then you are heating the water around it in order to take those oils and essences off of the flower, and then you're distilling it so that it collects onto a pan above and then drops into a bowl inside of the same unit. So that's going to give you a lot of different flavors than your normal ideas of like infusions or extractions. And then because those flavors are so pure, that's really what you're getting when you're getting those flower-based liqueurs, or waters. So, when you think about it, you're dealing with a concentrate. You're dealing with something that's going to have a lot of essence packed into it versus, like when you're working with yuzu, or if you're working with different type of fruits where you're working with the juices, or you're maybe working with some of the peel, those flavors are going to be a little bit more consumable. And also people are used to those flavors in their everyday cuisine. When people are going to floral, usually they're not going to see that as much. So those flavors are much more pronounced. One of the things that we also looked at was, how do you make a better aviation, or how do you work with violet in ways that people haven't thought of? And when we were looking at that, we were looking at like lassis from Mediterranean and Indian food, where they're using a lot of, alternative milks or nuts and things in order to soften it. Yogurt has a really nice sourness that can help balance out floral flavors. And if you play with that in your cocktails, I think you'll find a lot more success when you're incorporating in florals. Thinking about how you're going to balance it and round it with a nutty texture. So use an orgeat, or even just use an infusion, or we've had a lot of success lately with doing a wash with sesame oil, which gets a really nice nuttiness. So you can bring those elements in, and don't think about the floral thing as being a single note. I think in a lot of cocktails, they tend to go with just, lemon juice and then the base spirit, and then they add the crème de violet or the other floral note. For me, like, that can be simple and pure, but I think that most people that you're serving your cocktails to, that's going to be so straightforward. Again, it's going to be just like a one-trick pony, and it won't really work overall for something that people are going to want again and again.
Mm. So you said you fat wash. Do you fat wash the crème de violette?
So in that case, we're actually doing the fat wash on the base spirit,
Okay.
And then incorporating it in. But you could do it the other way around if you're wanting to do like a milk punch, or if you're wanting to go with fat wash of the whole cocktail. That can just be trickier because then you're playing with the dilution ratio before freezing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So much goes into creating cocktails. It just never ceases to amaze me. The creativity is just amazing. But just at a basic level, Kyle, what color is my aviation supposed to be?
Your aviation should be a light sky blue. It should not be a deep purple.
And there shouldn't be a bunch of purple in the bottom of my cocktail glass.
Yeah, bottom of your martini glass. No one wants that last big hit of crème de violet to punch them in the face.
Yeah. Because I've seen a lot of bartenders, they'll do that where they pour it down the spoon so that it goes directly to the bottom.
And it looks pretty, but
yeah, it doesn't taste so good.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've all been guilty of it because, again, I think a lot of people look in the cocktail book, and there's a lot of photographers that say like, "Ooh, I'm not really capturing this," because it's hard to capture that like really light steely blue that you get from a quarter to less than a quarter of an ounce of crème de violet. But that's the way the drink should look, and it won't look that great in a dark cocktail bar, especially if you have like yellow lighting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to come out the way you think it is. It looks good against the white background with a lot of light. That's something that we work on a lot at OHLQ as well, is making sure that we're doing the drink justice and saying, is this what the guest is going to make when they follow this recipe, are they able to get this result? So sometimes we have to pull ourselves back from the theatrics of wanting to see that bright layer of purple or blue and say, like, that's not realistic. Let's make sure we represent the ingredients.
Right.
So for our listeners who don't know, OHLQ is the Ohio Liquor Control website. You can go to ohlq.com and get cocktail ideas, and Kyle is the person who creates all of those cocktails, which is pretty cool. Thank you for your service.
It's a lot of fun. Well, thank you. It's one of those things where I feel so connected to both the local community and the state, and seeing them wanting to do the right thing and the right search and do the research just makes me so excited about the direction that Ohio is going as far as spirits is concerned.
We agree. Yeah.
All right, Kyle. Well, you're at Soul Bar. Tell our listeners what your hours are, when we can find you there.
So Soul Bar is open 7 days a week. We usually open for a light Amaro-based happy hour at 3 o'clock every day. And the last call goes at 10:30 to 11 o'clock almost every night. We like to get people to bed responsibly. But it's a good time. We have some wonderful events coming up here at the hotel, which you can always find on either our Instagram page or at the website.
Wonderful. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on. And again, it's always wonderful to talk to you both.
Same. Cheers.
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 Listeners, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Seabus Craft Cocktail Tour. Visit our website at columbuscraftcocktailtour.com for cocktail tour dates, women and whiskey tastings, special events, merchandise, and if you're looking for a gift for that special person in your life, get them a gift card to our cocktail tour. Thank you to the biographer for our original music. And please remember to drink responsibly and be cocktail curious. Cheers.